This is draft season presented by Moody's. Hello, everybody. I am John Schmeelk, joined by, as always, Tony Pauline from Sports Kita. Tony, we are to the end of the regular season of college football. It is bowl time. It is playoff time.
Absolutely is. A few bowl games already done and completed this past weekend, and the first round of the college football playoffs coming up this coming weekend should be exciting. We'll get into those games a little bit.
Absolutely. Draft season is presented by Moody's. As I mentioned, decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, Tony, we'll do first things first. We have a lot of declarations. We have our college football preview, but first, let's start with the big college football news over the weekend. That was the Heisman Trophy, which was one of the
Yeah.
closest first place vote uh, contests in quite a long time. And it goes to Travis Hunter, who just ekes it out over
Yep.
Ashton Jeanty, who could both be potential top 10 picks this year.
Yeah, I would have voted for Ashton Jeanty. I thought he deserved it. It's understandable why Travis Hunter won the award. He got most of the headlines. Plays offense, plays defense, also plays on a team that plays afternoon football on Saturday, plays early games, 7:30 games, where Boise State is usually starting 9, 10 o'clock at night. So I think the wider Eastern voters did not get to see Ashton Jeanty. Both guys are going to be top 10 picks. I liked Ashton Jeanty because, yeah, Travis Hunter's a phenomenal player. But I think even if you take Travis Hunter off the Colorado team, they're still a very good team. They still have other outstanding receivers for Shedeur Sanders to throw the ball to. Maybe they lose a little bit on defense, but they're still an 8-9 win team. I think if you take Ashton Jeanty off of Boise State, there's no way they're getting a bye in the first round of the college football playoffs. They may not even make the college football playoffs if Ashton Jeanty's not on that team. So I think that Ashton Jeanty just meant more to Boise State than Travis Hunter meant to Colorado. That's not to demean Hunter. That just shows the sort of impact that Jeanty had. And remember, I mean, he had a great game against the number one team in the nation, Oregon,
You hit
and
it.
Boise State only lost that game by 3 points.
No, I'm with you 100%. I think I would have voted for Jeanty too. Better team, plays for a better team, has a bye in the college football playoffs. And I think it's all about how much do you want to credit Hunter for being a two-way player, right? Because I think Genty's probably a better player at what he does, but he doesn't do as much as Travis Hunter does. Like just from a draft perspective, there's no doubt Genty's the top running back in the draft. If Travis Hunter was just a wide receiver, I don't think I would pick him over Ted McMillan. I don't know about you, Tony. I'm not sure I would. I probably would make him my top corner over Will Johnson. I think that's a closer conversation that we can have over the next few months, and I'm sure we will. But I think it's just a matter of how much you want to boost him because he plays two positions.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, the difference between Ashton Jeanty and the next cornerback that's going to be selected in the draft, whether it be O'Marion Hampton of North Carolina, whoever, is almost a full round when you
Yeah,
think
next
about
running back.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, when you look at Travis Hunter compared to the next receiver, it's a few picks. Travis Hunter next to the next cornerback, it's a few picks. But I think that it was Travis Hunter 24/7 throughout the entire college football season. And for those voters who were not dedicated college football watchers, didn't stay up and really follow Ashton Jeanty, I think that hurt him. I think it also hurt him the fact that, you know, the Big 12 is not a great defensive conference, but it is still a better defensive conference than the Utah States of the world, the UNLVs of the world, the Colorado
Yeah.
States of the world, who Ashton Jeanty was playing against week after week. Listen, I love Ashton Jeanty as an NFL prospect. People kind of downgrade the running back position as we've seen. I think there is no reason this guy should not be a top 10 pick.
Yeah, I think especially in this year's draft class, right, Tony, where you don't have, dominant players at dominant positions like you had last year, right? With all the offensive tackles, with all the wide receivers, guys like that. You don't have guys at
Yep.
those premium spots this year. So I would be more than willing this year to move Genty up my board, especially if you're a team that you feel like you have a pretty good offense in place already. And the way I've kind of come around these running backs, Tony, is that running back is something that you want to add to an already burning fire. It's kind of like lighter fluid, right? If you have lighter fluid, you throw it on some wood, but there's no flame, it's not going to do anything. But if you already got something cooking and it's going well, you throw the running back on, like Derrick Henry with the Ravens, Josh Jacobs with the Packers, Saquon Barkley with the Eagles, then the flame blows up and erupts, right? And you really rolling. So I think if you have an offense, like if you're the Bears, for example, right? You got Caleb Williams, you got a couple really good wide receivers now. I think they need to address their offensive line. But just in terms of skill position guys, you throw a running back into that mix, I think it kind of makes everything else better.
Or even the Dallas Cowboys. I mean,
Yeah,
for that matter,
that's a good one.
who's got a decent offensive line. I think that, especially with the questions at the quarterback position, the quarterbacks are going to be overdrafted. But I think Ashton Jeanty as a running back and as a prospect is a pretty safe pick. I think that he can fit a variety of systems. I think you can, he's a guy who can turn the perimeter, run on the inside, good pass catcher. So he's a pretty safe pick, which you often don't find at the running back position.
And I stole that lighter fluid analogy from Robert Mays over at the Athletic, so I have to give Robert credit for that. But I've always kind of felt that way. You don't want to start the running back; you want to end with the running back, and kind of, and then he kind of supercharges what you already have. So, and by the way, I think we both think Travis Hunter will get picked before Ashton Jeanty. He's a great
Yeah,
talent. He's going to be a really good pro. We're not trying to downgrade Travis Hunter here. He's fantastic. And I'm still leaning towards Tony wherever he winds up if he wants to play both ways. There's no way you could do both. I've talked to guys in the Giants locker room here off the record. Just say, do you think that's possible, guys? Could you play both? And they all kind of laughed. They're like, there's no chance
yeah.
in hell that guy's a full-time player on two sides in the NFL. So there's a lot of reasons for that. Physically, the meetings are all at the same time. You can't learn both spots. Can't practice at the same time at both spots. But just, you know, you can't really be a full-time wide receiver and a part-time corner. I think you can be a part-time wide receiver and a full-time corner, though. So if I was drafting Hunter, my plan for him would be put him at corner, let him be an every down corner, and then find the 15 to 20 most important offensive plays every week that you want him on the field. Maybe you have some custom design stuff for him that you want him involved in. That's when you put him out there for offense.
Even 15 to 20 plays is going to be,
Yeah, it's a lot.
pretty tall order. You just better be, pretty firm that his ball skills are established and there's not going to be no breakdowns because while I agree with you, a mishap or a mental lapse or, just something where he misses an assignment or doesn't transition well can lead to big plays for the opponents when he's in the defensive backfield versus a receiver. It's going to be an interesting debate moving forward. I think it could be a situation. We talk about left tackles here all the time. Do they project to guard? And I always feel if a guy's got decent arm length, even if he's a little bit shorter, put him at left tackle until he proves he can't play left tackle, then maybe move him inside. It may be that sort of situation with Travis Hunter for a team that wants him at cornerback. We're going to put him at cornerback until he proves that he can't be a number one or a number two cornerback out on the flanks. And if need be, we'll then flip him the receiver.
That's a good one too, Tony. Because look, cornerbacks fail going into the pros. It's great. I think what adds to his value, right? So if you get into year two and you're like, oh, this corner thing's not working out, you can just slide him at receiver and you might still have a really good player in your hands. That's a good point.
Right. Now I put him at receiver, and then you use him rather than a full time cornerback, maybe as a nickel or a dime back.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the other thing we're tracking now, and we'll get to the college football playoffs in a little bit. Now we're having all the underclassmen declare for the NFL. There is a deadline here. So if they want to participate in college all-star games, the soft deadline of January 6th has been added to give players an opportunity to submit their petitions for special eligibility to the league sooner. An initial list of names will be released to NFL teams and the public on January 7th. Players will have until January 9th to revoke their submission. The traditional hard deadline for underclassmen to submit a petition to the league is January 15th. A list of names will be released to NFL teams and the public on January 16th. Players will have until January 18th to revoke that submission. So there's also a special championship deadline of January 24th, exclusively for the teams that are participating in the college football playoff national championship game. And those players will have until January 27th to revoke their submission. So there's kind of three different deadlines here for those that are in the Shrine and Senior Bowl, those that aren't, and then those that are in the championship game of the college football playoff. So these things are coming, Tony. You're in the know. You're talking to a lot of agents and such. how's this process going for players this year as they make this determination as to whether or not they're going to come out in the draft with the college football playoffs, the All-Star games, with all the underclassmen being eligible, knowing they've been eligible since the summer? How's this process kind of playing itself out this year?
Well, the only variable in the process are the NIL deals. And we'll talk about that with some of the players that have decided to stay. I mean, that is the variable that teams and agents don't know about, because players who are on the fence, players who are even more leaning towards entering the draft, if all of a sudden the school comes back with a massive NIL deal. There is one player who's supposed to go to the Shrine Game who I know his college is offering him $1 million to come back at a very ordinary position. That is the that is the variable that can change whether a player is going to enter or not enter the draft. The interesting thing is, you talk about how there's that 3-day period where the player can put his name in to enter the draft, and he's got 3 days to pull it out. In the past, the player was able to pull his name out of the being eligible for the draft if he had not signed with an agent. I don't know if they changed those rules, because most of these guys have agents to negotiate their NIL deals. So that is an interesting variable. But the thing that people don't know about is, if these guys are leaning towards entering the draft and the school comes with a very large NIL deal, that could sway could sway a certain player to come back. And I'm sure that's what happened with Drew Alar.
Yes, so let's get to it. We'll talk about the players that declared in a second. But two quarterbacks, Tony, that
Yeah.
we have been discussing as potential quarterbacks coming out. Maybe not first round picks, but early second rounders, late first rounders, perhaps. Drew Alar of Penn State and Garrett Nussmeier of LSU. Both those players, I think both of us agree, making the smart decision to go back to school.
And the interesting thing is, I wrote an article at Sportskeeda last month where everybody at Penn State was saying that they expected Alar to enter the draft. He now turns around and he says he's staying. That was the right decision for him and Nussmeier, especially for Alar, because we expected so much from him after that true freshman season, where he looked like he was going to be the next great quarterback prospect, or one of the next great quarterback prospects. And his game has kind of leveled off. I mean, he's been up and down. He's been very streaky. We saw that throughout the season. So now he goes back, and you look towards 2026, where he will now, if he has a good campaign in 2025, he's going to probably be quarterback number one and a very early pick if he's able to elevate his game, if he's able to overcome the inconsistencies that he's shown really the past 2 years. And there are a lot of inconsistencies there. I mean, at times I like to say he looks like a world beater, and then he looks like an egg beater. You wonder where he's throwing the ball. And it's also great for Penn State from a college football point of view. You look at Oregon, the number one team in the nation, you look how much talent they're going to lose at the end of the season. You look at Ohio State, they're going to be a completely different team in 2025. So now Penn State, with Alar coming back and a lot of other players coming back, now all of a sudden, right off the bat, they're the number one team in the Big Ten. And in the preseason, they're going to be very highly rated. I also think for Nussmeier, I mean, I was not on a Nussmeier bandwagon. People were already projecting him as a first round pick. And I think we both said we need to see a larger body of work. So for him to go back, as well as Alar, I think they both made the right decision, especially in a year where there were so many questions at the quarterback position. And, except for maybe Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, no one really established themselves as very early picks, top 10 picks in the draft. And even those guys have questions.
Yeah, look, and it says, I think both those guys believe next year they could, if they play better, be first round picks, right? And I think they're best borderline this year. What does this do overall, in your opinion, Tony, to this year's draft class at quarterback? I think, we also think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders will probably be the top two guys off the board.
Right.
And we're still waiting on Jalen Milroe to see what he decides to do. And then you get into the, day two guys, day three guys, the Carson Becks. We'll see about Quinn Ewers. We'll see about Beck too, right? Once what his injury situation is with the college football playoffs. We'll see Jackson Dart. I think we all expect he's going to come out, but he's going to be maybe an early day three pick. So how do you now see this classic quarterback, seeing who's coming and who's going? And what do you think? Have you heard anything on Milroe, just to kind of add to that conversation?
I'm thinking Milroe. The belief is now that Milroe is very likely to enter the draft. about 50-50 right now. Again, that NIL package could sway him. I would be shocked if Quinn Ewers goes back to Texas. I think he is all in to enter the draft. And I think that is a guy who, we talked about this before with some of our past guests, how these college football playoffs offer an extended season where some of these players, if they play lights out, that's what people are going to remember, and it could help their draft stock. I'm not a big fan of really elevating a guy on a game or two, but a guy like Quinn Ewers, if he plays really well, through the college football playoffs, he happens to lead Texas into the finals. I think the fact that an Alar and a Nussmeier pulling out, and a guy like Quinn Ewers, assuming he plays well, it's really going to help his stock because, as we know, you get into the late part of round one, and then a team that needs a quarterback, that didn't take one at the early part of round one, early pick portion of the draft, they will hop back into the late part of round one and get that quarterback. And Quinn Ewers can be that guy. As far as Carson Beck's concerned, you touched on something. We don't know about that elbow injury. I talked to a couple of people who think that it could be really bad. So Carson Beck, with the elbow injury, with what is a terrible season, I mean, there's no way the guy's going to go top 45. He could fall out of the second round after the season he had. Now he's got the elbow injury, so he's got a decision to make as well.
Yeah, and we'll see how that works out and what that top of the draft class is. And neither one of those quarterbacks, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, are in the college football playoffs. Shedeur Sanders says he will play in Colorado's bowl game, so that'll be interesting to see. And Cam Ward, I believe, is also going to play in Miami's bowl game, correct?
I believe so. And I actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I wrote a story about that at Sportskeeda, and the basis of the story is you're probably going to see a lot less opt-outs in this year's bowl games because you remember in the past, it used to be your early picks that would opt out. And then the past couple of years, guys who were seventh round picks were opting out of bowl games because they wanted to prepare for the draft. And the rosters for those bowl games were completely reshaped. The article I had at Sportskeeda centered on the fact that a lot of these NIL deals, they end on December 31st. The last payment to these players is in late December, and that last payment is usually the largest payment. So in order for a lot of these players to get that last check, that last NIL check
funny.
for the contract that they signed, they have to play in the bowl game.
I love that, Tony. That's great. I did not know that was the case. That's great insight from you. It's funny. I'm planning a renovation on the basement. I have a friend that works in contracts. He said, John, here's what you do. Make sure you never pay everything up front. Right. Save a decent amount of the payment until after the work is done to make sure everything is done to your satisfaction. That's how you make sure you get everything you want out of the deal. It's the exact same conversation, which is hilarious.
And again, go back to the article I wrote. It's, a lot of these checks are $20,000 to $50,000 to basically play one or two games in December. That first week in December, maybe if your team's in the conference championship game, that's the second game, but the bowl game. So they're really not playing that much football in the month of December for what ends up to be their biggest paycheck of the college football season.
That's funny. All right, let's go through some of the guys that have declared, Tony. Travis Hunter, the wide receiver corner out of Colorado. He said he's coming out. We've already talked about him. No need to do that anymore. DJ Ugalele, who's the transfer from Clemson, now Florida State quarterback, coming out late day 3, priority free agent. What do you think?
I mean, I understand why he came out. You might as well see where your football career is going to go at this point. I mean, you remember Ugalele, he played those 2 games with Trevor Lawrence in 2020 when he was a freshman because Trevor Lawrence had tested positive for COVID. This was during the COVID season. And it was like, wow. I mean, Clemson's not going to miss a beat going from Trevor Lawrence to Ugalele. Trevor Lawrence becomes the first pick of the draft. Everyone's expecting a lot from Ugalele. It was a dud. It was a dud for 2 years at Clemson. He goes to Oregon State. He shows some good things. He transfers to Florida State. I'm sure he wants to get his revenge against Clemson. It's been a disaster. It was a disaster for Ugalele. It's been a disaster for Florida State. He's got nothing to lose. I think he's got more to lose going back to college because if he doesn't turn it around, he could go and be undrafted. He's got a lot of physical skills. There's just a lot of staring down the primary target, some accuracy issue.
Then you have Iowa running back Caleb Johnson, coming out. He's really climbed, I think, a lot of the running back ratings, and it's going to be a fierce competition, I think, for who the second running back in this class is going to be. A lot of really good players. Another one's going to be up in this segment a little bit later on. What do you think of Caleb Johnson? I know it took you a little while to warm to him. What are you hearing on the street about him, and could he be the second running back off the board?
Possibly. Again, well, Marion Hampton, there's a couple other names there, but I think he's going to be a second round pick. He's an explosive back. A lot of these Iowa running backs that have come out in the past are basically straight line backs. But you watch Johnson, he's fast, he's explosive. He's also got some jiggle. He's got some wiggle in his running. He can make defenders miss on the inside. He's got the speed to hit the home run. Had a terrific campaign. I'm hearing right now will battle with the rest of the guy, with the other second tier running backs after Ashton Jeanty to be the second running back selected. Unlikely he gets out of the top 60.
Any chance a second running back goes at the end of the first round, Tony? You think because it's so deep, teams are going to wait?
I think there's an opportunity. I mean, you get into those late picks in round one, as we've seen in the past. San Francisco last year with the receiver from Florida. Strange things can happen. So it wouldn't shock me if in those last 5 to 6 picks, where we sit right now, a second running back goes in the first round after Ashton Jeanty.
The other running back that declared is Ollie Gordon, the running back out of Oklahoma State. He's a guy that I know some people had in their top three or top four before the year. I haven't heard as much hype on him over the course of the year. I watched him in the summer getting ready for the year, and nothing really jumped out at me. He didn't seem all that explosive to me. What are you hearing about Gordon on the streets?
Coming off a bad season, maybe third round, more likely early fourth round. Had some very productive seasons at Oklahoma State, who had a terrible campaign this year. The thing about Gordon is he's got a good burst, he's got some quickness, runs with a very upright style, which
Yeah,
is
he
not good
is
for a
very
running back
upright. Yep.
because that leads to a lot of big hits, potential fumbles. He's going to have to change his running style. You're going to have to be comfortable with that running style if you take him within the first 100 picks. I think right now you're looking at more fourth round area.
And you could be upright if you're Derrick Henry because you weigh 250 pounds, but not if you're Ollie Gordon. A little bit different. All right, let's go to Deion Walker, Tony. He's a guy preseason. I thought he could be a top 10, top 15 pick. Now people are talking more second round for him, but with his size and athleticism, why do you think people have cooled on him a little bit as part of the Kentucky defense that actually has done a pretty darn good job this year?
Yeah, I mean he is a big guy. I understand what I think it's a good move that he came out. I think the conditioning, the fact that he kind of wears down over the course of games is a concern. People on paper, they think that these 350, 360-pound players are, they don't grow on trees. Doesn't always translate well to the next level. So he's going to have to get that weight down. I think if he's focused on football, there's going to be a lot of intense questioning at the combine about that. How dedicated is he to off the field, off season training? If a team is comfortable with that, I could see him jumping into the back end of round one because of what you said. He's not just a big guy that takes up space and occupies blockers. I mean, he makes plays on the ball. He's got a burst. He's got a closing burst. He can rush the passer. But the overall size is a bit of a concern right now. That's going to have to be answered by him in the postseason.
Yeah, we saw Devondre Sweat last year. He had some off the field stuff that
Yep.
obviously Deion Walker does not, but similar size and athleticism profile to Walker, and he was picked in the second round. So without the off field stuff, I could easily see Walker surpassing that, especially in a draft class that's so polarizing. Guys just don't grow on trees that are that big, and Sweat is having a pretty darn good rookie year. He's played well.
Sure, and he was a good player at Texas. But the issue was, I mean, he was reportedly close to 390 pounds at the Senior Bowl. I think he got it down to just under 370 at the combine. And you're going to have to be comfortable with a guy that big. That he's not going to balloon over 400 pounds. We're here in New York. We remember what happened with Mekhi Becton. Granted, the other side of the ball, but after his rookie year, he was upwards of 415 pounds. He's never been the same player. You've got to be comfortable that guy is going to go opposite, going to lose weight, going to get a little bit smaller rather than balloon up, which would just ruin his football career.
Will Campbell, the offensive tackle of LSU, coming out. Tony, first offensive lineman off the board, you think right now, or do you think a guy like Kelvin Banks might go ahead of him?
I still think it's going to be Will Campbell. Obviously, people have talked about his arm length. If it's 33 and a half or over, people be comfortable with him at left tackle. He's been up and down. I think early in the season, he was a little bit soft. He turned it on late in the year. I mean, you could say he's the best pure left tackle in this year's draft class. Kelvin Banks is very good. Kelvin Banks is better blocking in motion, but but Will Johnson's got better size. He's got better length. He's got better growth potential. I do think he'll be the first offensive tackle taken, unless people are turned off by his early season film, where to me he just played a little bit soft.
All right, then we have three Michigan players, Tony. Colson
Yeah.
Loveland, the tight end. Mason Graham, the all-world defensive tackle, who I would feel great about picking him in this draft no matter where I'm selecting. And then Will Johnson, the cornerback. Those three guys, I want to focus in on Campbell a little bit, Tony, because I watched him a little bit the last couple of weeks. It's funny, and I went back to my notes from him over the summer, and I didn't look at those notes before I made notes for this year. And when I looked at them, they were exactly the same. Not a lot of plays on the football, a lot of off coverage, a lot of stuff caught in front of him in soft coverage. Don't think he's going to run a sub 4.45 40. I know, maybe like a 4.48 guy, something like that. I know he's long. I know he's big. I just wonder when you actually watch his play without the traits. He reminds me a little bit like Jeffrey Okudah coming out of Ohio State a few years ago, where a lot of off coverage, a lot of stuff in front of him, same type of deal. And I don't know. I can't get there with him as like a top 5 pick just watching him on tape. Like he doesn't look like Sauce Gardner to me. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing is that the scheme or is that the player when he's
Good
playing off
question.
coverage and there's a lot of things in front? Because to me, he looks like he'd be best in man coverage and bump and run coverage. And if they're playing him,
They don't
in
use
off,
him that way though. You know what I mean? He's not doing it much.
they did as a freshman. His freshman year film was outstanding,
I have
where
to go
he
back there.
played
Yeah,
bump and
I
run
watched
coverage.
last year and this year. I didn't watch his freshman stuff.
He could flip his hips in transition. He runs downfield. He gets his head back around. A lot of times they were just not throwing in his direction, which led to not a lot of plays or not a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of it will go to what the coaches say about it. Ironically, his defensive coordinators, Wink Martindale, was that the design to play him off, backed off, man off coverage and keep the action in front of him as opposed to bump and run coverage. He's going to play. He's going to play whatever the scheme is. He's got to play within the scheme. And overall, I think when you had the injury to the Notre Dame kid, Notre Dame cornerback, I think Will Johnson, I still think he's going to be a very early pick. Is he the first cornerback selected? Well, it depends on what you're drafting Travis Hunter as. Are you drafting Travis Hunter primarily as a corner or primarily as your wide receiver?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'll have to go back. And it's funny too. Wink plays a lot of he played a lot of press man in the pros. So I'm curious as to why there wasn't as much there for Will Johnson. The other two guys, Mason Graham, we talked about him a ton. I think he could be a top 5 pick this year, maybe even top 3 or 4 pick. I think he's that good compared to other players in the class. And then Colson Loveland, the tight end, Tony. You think he's going to sneak into the first round?
I think he's going to be the first tight end selected. I think he's a perfect fit for a team like the LA Chargers, where he goes back to his former college coach. They need a tight end. There was talk of them potentially taking Brock Bowers. He's not Brock Bowers, that's for sure. I'm told, he doesn't look like a fast guy on film, but I'm told he's going to run pretty well in workouts, in combine workouts, pro day workouts, potentially 4.6s, 4.5s. I absolutely think he'll be the first tight end selected in the first round, the bottom third of round one, maybe the final 10 picks.
All right, then you have Ohio State offensive tackle Josh Simmons dealing with an
Right.
injury, but if teams are drafting for upside, Tony, you could argue he might be the first offensive tackle off the board.
Terrific in 2023. I thought he played well early in 2024. It was an early injury. There's two ways to look at it. The injury occurred during that Oregon game, which was, I believe, the beginning of October, which means he should be back sooner than later, but his game really doesn't have a lot of game film from last year. But yeah, he showed me a lot of ability, and I wrote about it at Sportskeeda. Fundamentally sound, moves well, real good in pass protection, uses his hands exceptionally well. It's just the team's got to be comfortable with the injury, and they got to be comfortable. They got to figure if you're taking him at the end of round one, you have to figure that he's going to be your starter at least midway through the season. You've got that. That is the dynamic there, and any team that drafts him has got to be comfortable with that.
And then finally, two Texas A&M players, Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart.
Yeah, both big offensive linemen. I know Scorton's your guy. Was a
Defensive line.
defensive line. I'm sorry. Pass rushes. Scorton was your guy, makes a lot of Purdue transfer, makes a lot of plays in the backfield. And Shamar Stewart is a bigger guy. He's got some growth potential. He's very athletic, unpolished. Scorton, I could see going late in round one. I think Stewart's a little, maybe a quarter of a round later than that.
Yeah, we haven't seen the production bump from Scorton this year that I would have hoped, but I think actually it might be Scourton. I've heard somebody call him Scourton. I'll have to double check and confirm the pronunciation on that. But yeah, those are the guys that have declared. We'll keep tracking that for you right here on draft season. So stay tuned as we continue to do that throughout the draft process right here. Draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risks into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, Tony, let's jump over now to the college football playoffs. They get going this weekend. First, let's begin with Indiana Notre Dame. The winner of that game will take on Georgia. Curtis Rourke, the quarterback for Indiana, was a transfer, came over with the head coach. And then you like him going against Xavier Watts, the safety for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana, a year ago, who would have thought that Indiana would be in this position? I mean, Kurt Cignetti is the best college football coach in America, pro or college, just won the AP Coach of the Year. Well deserved. I mean, you look at the Indiana roster, they don't have great talent. I mean, they got maybe one or two guys that are going to be drafted. One of them is Curtis Rourke, and he is a great game manager, 27 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, had thumb surgery in the second half of the season, came back and played. He's a leader. He's smart. He protects the football. You know, now they're going against Notre Dame. They played Michigan, and they played Michigan well. Indiana, he played well, although that offensive line kind of tired at the end of the game. They lost a bad game to Ohio State, but that was due to special teams. Xavier Watts, the safety from Michigan, 5 interceptions and 8 PBUs, pass breakups this year. Those are great numbers for a safety. That is going to be an interesting matchup to watch. You know, the thing that I want to know, and people should watch with Curtis Rourke, is does he have the downfield arm? Does he have a vertical arm to get the ball downfield with speed? If he does, I think he's going to turn a lot of people on in the postseason, especially with what he's done at Indiana with not great talent around him.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to see how that goes. And then Xavier Watts, the safety for Notre Dame. Also, you have Howard Cross the third on that defense, too.
Right.
Benjamin Morse in the corner. He's not playing in the game. Obviously, he got hurt earlier in the year, but another guy that should be drafted high. So tell me about Watts, and then give me some love on Howard Cross's, my colleagues here, son, Howard Cross the third, who decided to go back to school last year.
Yeah, Watts is a nice size safety, excellent ball skills. Like I said, 5 interception, 8 PBUs. Not a guy that's a straight line safety. Makes a lot of plays when the ball is in the air. So Curtis Rourke is going to have to, be wary of him. Going to have to find out where he is and maybe go to the other side of the field. Howard Cross, real good player, more of a 3 technique, 1 gap type of lineman. Very explosive off the snap. Great first step. Excellent change of direction. I think he's a guy who's going to be a later round guy. But if you got a 4-man front and you need one of those 1 gap defensive tackles that can rush the passer, that is, penetrates the line of scrimmage, you're looking towards Howard Cross the third.
Yeah, only about 290 pounds. Not a big lineman, Tony. They've asked him to play nose guard, which is the funny thing in that system. But I agree. I think in the league, he's much more of a 3 technique. I'm with you on that. All right, game number 2, SMU taking on Penn State. I'm sure at the start of the year, all of us thought this would be one of the college football playoff matchups, Tony. The winner of this game will take on Boise State, another team I'm sure everyone knew would be rocking and rolling. Drew Alar, obviously the quarterback for Penn State, he's going back. But Tyler Warren, his tight end, we all believe is coming out here. So talk about them going against some of those defenders for SMU.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Warren's the dual tight end, right? I had insane production last year as a pass catcher. He's a solid blocker. Played some center this year, so he does everything. And I think if you watched Penn State, Drew Alar looked towards Warren almost to a fault because he was so reliable and he missed open all the receivers, although Penn State doesn't have great receivers. So you want to watch Warren. As far as the SMU is concerned, they don't have a lot of talent. They're sort of like Indiana. Keep an eye on their safety, Isaac Nwokobia. 96 tackles this year, 3 interceptions, 3 PBUs. He's a guy who makes plays all over the field. an underclassman. I'm told he's considering entering the draft, but again, that NIL deal may come in and keep him at SMU. He's a bigger guy who goes sideline to sideline, great against the run, good against the pass. There's going to be a lot of matchups between Nokobia and Tyler Warren. Got to keep that an eye on that because that is a next level matchup.
And there are other Penn State players too to keep an eye on, Tony. I'm going to list three. You can talk about them or anyone else you want to discuss. You got your man Abdul Carter, the pass rusher. You have Kevin Winston Jr., the safety. Then you have running back Nicholas Singleton as well, who has had some production this year.
Yeah, I think the one guy I mentioned is Abdul Carter. Can SMU stop him? I mean, are they going to game plan around him? They have a quarterback, an RPO quarterback, who's good running the ball, passing the ball, and get outside the pocket, make plays. And that's something they're probably going to have to do because I don't know that the SMU offensive line is going to be able to contain Abdul Carter.
Let's go to Clemson in Texas.
Yeah.
Barrett Carter, a player we talked about during last year's process, right? He came back to school. He's going to come out now, the linebacker for Clemson. And you like the matchup against Gunnar Helm from Texas.
Well, we talked about Gunnar Helm, or some of our guests have talked about Gunnar Helm, the tight end from Texas. He's had a great year. He's had a real good year. I don't know that he's a great prospect. I think he's more of a day three type prospect. He's good pass catcher. He's good blocker. Not a great athlete. I'm not expecting great testing times. Barrett Carter is your prototypical weak side linebacker in the days where weak side linebackers in the 4-3 were valued. He's a running chase linebacker. He's very athletic. He covers a lot of area on the field. It's going to be sort of a mismatch because Gunnar Helm's probably got 3 to 4 inches, if not more, on Barrett Carter. So he's going to have that height advantage. And I'm sure that Quinn Ewers is going to be looking his way often throughout that game. I think it's going to be a tough game for Clemson. I mean, they just don't match up well against Texas, who's got terrific talent on the offensive line, on their defense, their defensive line, in their secondary. They did a great job beating SMU in overtime with that 56-yard field goal to sneak into to get that final spot of the college football playoffs. But I think this could be a big blowout in Texas's favor because Clemson just does not match up.
Yeah, well, Clemson's going to have to figure out a way, and I think it'll be a good test for the Texas offensive line, right? If this Texas offensive line dominates this game and, yours is sitting back there and he's not pressured, this could go south. So I think it's a good test. Clemson, they're good up front on defense. They've always traditionally been a good defense there. So curious to see if Texas gets one more shot for these offensive linemen to show that they should be drafted high.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't mention too much, but Jahdae Barron, the cornerback from Texas, he's an opportunistic guy with outstanding ball skills. Could give that Clemson offense a very tough time when they try and put the ball in the air.
All right, winner of that game will take on Arizona State. Final game this weekend, Tony. Tennessee and Ohio State. This to me is the premier game. You get some really good players in this matchup, and you like the Tennessee defensive line going against that banged up Ohio State offensive line.
Well, if you watch the Michigan-Ohio State game with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front, they basically had their way with the Michigan, the Ohio State offensive line. Tennessee's got 3 real good players on the inside that are going to be day 3 picks to keep an eye on. They're not as talented as the Michigan defensive front, but they're intense. They're very explosive, and they keep on coming. So unless Ohio State changes their game plan, if they go into this game with the same sort of let's run the ball on the inside, I think Tennessee, has got a real chance at this game. And when you look at it from a pro prospect point of view, you got to keep an eye on the interior of that Tennessee defensive line. Everyone talks about James Pierce, the pass rusher, who in August and July people were projecting as a top 5 pick. He hasn't had the season that a lot of people expected, but those defensive tackles have, which has helped carry that defense. And when you flip it around, the Ohio State cornerbacks, Denzel Burke and the other kid, David, not even going to try and pronounce his last name, have had difficult years. You look at the Tennessee quarterback, who is an underclassman, not eligible for the draft, Nico Imaleve. He is a big play quarterback. So you're going to have to watch those Ohio State cornerbacks to basically keep that vertical passing game from Tennessee in check because they are prone to big plays down the field. And as we've seen, the Ohio State cornerbacks this year are prone to lapses, which results in big plays for the opposition.
Yeah, and finally, it's one more look at Dylan Sampson too, right? The
Yeah.
the the Tennessee running back. Well, I know some people have him in the mix for that second running back off the board. Day two pick for sure. What are your thoughts on Sampson?
Very explosive. I don't think he's going to be the second running back selected. Another real good Tennessee running back. I think he's more of a third round pick. This will be a terrific challenge for him because the strength of that Ohio State defense is that defensive line. Tyleik Williams on the inside. You got Jack Sawyer and Tumiloa on the edges. So, what can Dylan Sampson, be productive against a real good unit for Ohio State? I like Sampson as more of a third round pick. We talked about Caleb Williams. Sampson is explosive. He's fast, but he doesn't have that same wiggle, that same ability to make defenders miss as a Caleb Johnson. Caleb
Right.
Johnson body.
Tony, what are you cooking right now on Sports Keto that fans should check out?
Well, obviously, we've got breakdowns of all the games, all the college football games. We'll have a couple of mock drafts up soon and all the breaking news on the underclassmen. We talked about three of the Michigan guys entering the draft: Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland. I'm told that the fourth, Kenneth Grant, is also very likely to enter the draft.
Is your first mock draft up yet, or still not yet?
We had one right after Thanksgiving, and what we're going to be doing, what I've been asked to do, which is going to be interesting because I've never done, is we're going to do team by team mock drafts. So we're going to go team by team, probably 5 to 7 rounds right after Christmas.
5 to 7 rounds.
I
Challenging,
know.
Tony.
Yes, it is time consuming.
Godspeed, sir.
Thank you.
Tony, good stuff, man. And we will catch up with you guys right before Christmas Eve next week. We'll react to all the college football games. We'll get that up before the holidays. So in case you're driving around and you need to, you want to get some college football and draft breakdown on your holiday travels, that's great. And then the following, we're going to be on Thursday that week because we want to come on after the second round of the college football playoffs, which is taking place on New Year's. So we'll come with you on Thursday the following week. And my gosh, it's 2025. Who would have thought it? Tony, good stuff, my friend. Talk to you soon. Talk to you next week. Enjoy the college football playoffs.
Absolutely, John. You as well. Same to the viewers.
That's Tony Pauline from Sportskeeda. I am John Schmeelk. That was Draft Season, brought to you by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at moodys.com. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody. Happy holidays.